Hey guys, Shane here. So welcome to this inbox review of Dragon's 135th M4A1 76 Wet Operation Cobra. So this kit is reference 6083 and was first released in 2005. So this kit is a little bit old, it's getting along, and it kind of shows its ages in certain regards. However, it's still quite a nice kit, and it's probably my favourite of all the Shermans. So the M4A1 76 wet, or W for wet, which is in relation to its ammunition storage, which was the anti-fire solution of antifreeze and water, if I remember correctly. And this was like the modified version to stop the Sherman's ammunition from cooking off, which was the main killer for Sherman's, not the engine or the fuel. A lot of people make a lot of assumptions that it was the gas or the petrol engines. In reality, it was actually the ammunition that was the big issue with Sherman. And once they switched it to these encased ammunition racks with this anti-fire mixture or anti-flame mixture, the danger of the ammunition cooking off every time was massively reduced. So the M4A176 was built by the Pressed Steel Car Company. Approximately 2174 or so of these vehicles were built. It's got the real distinctive T23 turret, which is the larger style turret with the integrally built loader's escape hatch or loader's hatch, which also massively increased crew survivability. Apparently, when the US military did its post-war review of the performance of their tanks, so we all seem to think that the Sherman was this big long death trap and will kill everybody it went into, which is not entirely true. A lot of that notion is to do with books and popular notions like, Belton Cooper's death traps and all that. And yes, the Sherman could be a very dangerous tank to fight, and then again, so was every other tank in World War II, because it was a counter for everything. Even the or even the Tiger could be taken down by other means, not necessarily just by the 75 Sherman, unless it got behind it and got very lucky. The 76 could kind of deal with it at close enough ranges, but how the Allies dealt with big tanks like Tiger, they just shelled it to bits with like multiple artillery batteries and killed the crew with like high explosive percussion basically. However, when the Allies did their, especially the American Armoured Ordnance Department did their post-war review of these vehicles, they found that the Sherman, for every Sherman knocked out, they lost 1.6 crew. So basically, for every vehicle that was knocked out, they lost on average a person, and not all the crew like burning to death like everyone likes to make it sound. So Sherman was actually a lot more survivable for the crew. Yes, the vehicle will get hit, the vehicle will get knocked out, as we all know. So that part is true. However, once the vehicle did get hit, you had better survivability. So that's just like an interesting piece about the Sherman. And there is a little bit of a myth that this tank just wanted to kill its crew left, right, and centre. So back to the kit. Kit's from 2005, and it does have the early version of Dragon's kind of up moulding and up tooling. So this kit is rough in some areas and very good in others. So let's have a proper look. So we have our very attractive box art for Operation Cobra style vehicle. So the 76s actually stayed in England for the opening parts of Operation Overlord. A lot of armoured commanders did not want to deploy these vehicles. They were saying, why should I have to retrain my crew for the 76s? We don't need them. And there was also a lot of kind of grudgery that a lot of them didn't like the 76. They preferred the 75 because it was a more versatile gun. Because according to Steve Saloga, 3/4 of all ammunition fired by US armoured divisions in the Western Theatre of Operations was high explosive, because they weren't running into concentrations of German tanks every second day. It didn't happen as regularly as people seem to think it did. The most things that they were fighting was infantry of Panzerfaust, anti-tank guns, that type of thing, like more the infantry anti-tank arms and self-propelled guns. So the idea of having high explosive ammunition with a decent charge was more important than having a decent AP, or just as important, and they weren't really willing to sacrifice one over the other. So when the initial landings happened, these stayed in England, and then they started running into tanks like the Panther, where the 76 was really needed to deal with them. And then it literally took Omar Bradley to basically order his commanders to ship these tanks over from Britain and rejoin the fight. And this is a very paraphrased, kind of summary of what happened. It was a bit more to it than just that. And basically, by the time the 76 Shermans arrived, it was more or less time for the Normandy breakouts, or Operation Cobra, which, if I remember correctly, happened in August of 44. I might be wrong there. I'm just pulling that out of my mind. I think it was August. So that's what these vehicles are meant to represent. So with all this history out of the way, because I'm sure you all want to see what's in the box. So we have our nice box art. We have our side pictures of the vehicle. We have an actual built-up model of it rather than a CG render, which is always nice. A metal tow cable, cartograph decals, which should be very nice. They never do give any trouble, those decals. Then we have CG renders of various elements of the model. So we have a completely new M4A1 cast upper hull, as the M4A1 was a cast upper hull assembly. And we'll actually have a look at this. It's quite impressive. The cast textures are very nice on this. We have our T23 Turret, which again has very nice cast textures. So we have obviously our hatches can be opened and closed. Our split hatch and fission cupola can be opened. We have obviously our tow hitches with the integral step built into it to allow the crew to mount the vehicle. Pistol port can be opened, can be model open shut if you wish. Now it's shown that we have 2 slide molded barrels. In fact, we have 3 in the box. So we'll have a look at that in a few moments. We have our 50 cal with hollow muzzle, which we'll have a proper look as well. We have a deflector, a new gun mantlet. We also have 2 options of hatches for the engine deck, and we also have 2 sets of DS tracks of the T48 variety. So let's have a look and see what we get in the box. So normally all the parts in this box are pre-bagged in plastic bags. I have already removed those because I've checked out this kit a while ago. And so just so you know, when you buy this box, it does come with everything pre-bagged. There is no dragon card in this as per se though. This is before the whole dragon card craze took off for Dragon, and since they've more or less stopped doing dragon cards and just give us a little Ziploc bag full of stuff. So let's have a look at some of the parts in detail and see what we get. So looking at the instruction manual, so first thing we're going to notice is when we look at the sprue maps, just how much blue, which means parts we're not going to be using. So basically we'll see as I show you through the various sprues that these are all taken from various sprues from the entire Sherman family that Dragon has produced at one time or other. So some of the sprues are pretty up to date and others are ancient. So the quality of the moulding will change from sprue to sprue, as you will see. Now this does normally annoy me to see so much blue, meaning so much waste. However, since I am kind of like a Sherman guy, I don't mind this in this case because it gives me a lot of spares. So step 1, as always, we're working with our buggies and running gear. So you'll notice that there isn't many steps in this instruction manual. It's a very quick build. So step 1 and 2, we're doing our buggies or drive sprockets. I'm going to move very quickly through this. As you've seen one Sherman instruction sheet, you've seen all of them. Step 3, we're working on our engine deck, adding in our idler tensioners, if you will, the various mounting brackets for the idlers. Step 4, we're adding the air scrubbers for the engine, or the air cleaners, and then we're adding our buggies. What I normally do is I leave the buggies off when I'm painting the hull, just so I can get in and paint everything, and just mask off the area where the actual buggy will glue in, so I just have a proper surface to glue it into. Step 5, we're adding the transmission differential and the sides of the transmission cover, and then our drive sprockets and the final drives for those drive sprockets. It'd be interesting to see how this behaves. Sometimes these don't fit particularly well on some of the Dragon kits, so we'll just see how this behaves. With the M4A2 Tarawa, which I built a while back, this did fight me a little bit, so we'll just see how well it works with the M4A1. On to step 6, we're moving on to the upper hull now. So we're doing our driver and bow machine gunners hatches, adding in our brush covers, which are in plastic, as well as our periscope and the cover for the periscopes. So it'll be interesting to see how well the brush covers are done. In plastic they're often a little bit overscaled, but sometimes I kind of prefer them, even though it's not entirely accurate, but just the photo etch ones can be a little bit too fiddly, I find. I'm not really good with really small photo etch. It takes me a long time. I can do it after a while, after I lose my mind. We have like the adding of the 30 cal machine gun, our travel lock, our sirens, our front lights, the brush guards to the lights, which are also in plastic, so it'll be interesting to see how overscaled or underscaled they are. Then we have the the fender guards for our front fenders. Then we're on to step 7, and as you can see, it's very quick. This kit is a little bit simplified in certain places, but it should make up to a nice model. So we have the adding of the engine decks, we have covers, or we have optional engine covers with or without the fuel caps. We also have an armour cover for the ventilation louvre for the engine deck. We're adding our Pioneer tools, some more vents for the engine, the spare track racks that will like glue onto the back of the vehicle, as well as the small shelving unit that sits on the back of the vehicle, which is kind of simple. The Asuka model or Tasca ones are a bit more better detailed. So I'll probably be replacing that with one from my spare bits box, I'd say. On to step 8, adding more of the Pioneer tools and the lifting eyes to the back of the vehicle. Step 10, we're moving towards the turret now. So we have step 10, gun mantlet and the 76mm gun. We actually get 3 of these like I mentioned before, though the instruction does not show us that. So we do have 3 options. We have the 50 cal .5 or M2 HB, I believe, Browning. This is a bit of a weird looking gun. It's when you see it in plastic, it seems very weirdly proportioned. Then we have the split hatch or the loader, which you'll recognise immediately from the other Sherman families. And then we have the direct fission cupola, or the fission cupola as it's often known as, for the Commander, which was actually a very successful fission design. It's not as up to scratch from modern day, but for the time it did give the Commander quite an amount of situational awareness that could rival the German fission cupolas. Step 11, and this is the final step, so you can see how quickly this will build up. I could see this being built in a weekend very easily. There's not that many parts in it, as most of the parts aren't going to be used in the sprues. So step 11, we're adding the loaders, or should I say the gunner's periscope and his auxiliary gun sight, which is actually built into that periscope, as well as his direct vision periscope or gun sight that will be through his mantlet. We're also adding the 50 cal machine gun, the various radio caps. Then we're mounting the upper and lower turret, which means we're going to have a seam there, so we're going to have to hide that. But since this is a cast turret, like all the Sherman turrets, just put like a liquid putty, stipple that onto the seam and disguise it as a seam line or as a bit of cast texture. It's a very easy seam to hide. We have to drill a few holes, however, into the turret before we glue it all together, so ensure that you do that and don't forget about it. Then we're just adding our tow cable, and then the last thing it has us do is add the exhaust deflector. So 11 steps, not too much going on. Then we go on to our markings, and the markings are actual photographs of the built up model. So we have a marking option for a Polish Armour Division in 1944. We have US 2nd Armour Division, 1944, France. And we also have 3rd Armour Division, Belgium, 1944, again with the olive drab and kind of black, or almost like a NATO black style camouflage like pattern. It's quite attractive. That's probably the camo pattern I'm going to do. Then we have 32nd Armour Regiment, 3rd Armour Division, France, 1944. And then we have the 2nd Armour Division, France, 1944. So they're all pretty much the same. However, it does give us some options. And also the Polish option is kind of cool if you want to try to do something different. So let's start have a look at the plastic and see what we get. So the first thing I want to show you is the one-piece cast upper hull, which is the iconic and most easily distinguishing feature of the M4A1. So if you remember my review of Tasca's M4A1 early production, which I'll have a link to your top right now, you will notice that the Dragon one has a very pronounced cast texture, which is wonderful. This should be a very rough assembly because these are all molded with sand molds, so it gives us a very, very strong cast texture. Again, I'm not seeing any type of embellishment. It looks really good, or any perfection, should I say. So that should come together very nicely. Not seeing many cast numbering and foundry numbering, which there should be quite a few on this. However, it can be easily added, and I will be doing a video on foundry numbers and the foundry markings and how to read them on the Sherman, so keep an eye out for that in the next couple of weeks. So moving on to K-Sprue, and unfortunately the Irish rain has come, so I'm sorry for the noise in the background, but I do not control the I do not control the weather. So K-Sprue, we have one of the armoured covers for our engine deck. We have one of the loaders, or should I say one of the crew hatches in the front of the vehicle, either the driver or the bow machine gunner. We have some of the travel locks and the mounting bracket for our 50 cal machine gun, as well as the edges for the spare link racks on the vehicle. And then we have our retaining bolt assembly for the final drive at the front of the vehicle. So moving on, we have just to say what sprue this is, and this is from an M4 Sherman. So I'm just looking at what it says up here. So we're going to see this again and again in this model kit. It's just going to be different sprues from different Shermans. So again, at least you will get a very healthy spare bits box at the end of this, which is probably the only good thing. So we have basic undersight details. We have our escape hatch, some of the drainage plugs, the engine access panel here. It's pretty nice, very smooth plastic. And bear in mind, like, this is from 2005, so you'll notice that some of the sprues look very good and others have very heavy seam lines on them, which we'll see as we get going. Then we have our bogies and running gear suspension. So we have our FIFA SS suspension system here. We do have the internal or the integral cast numbering, as these were cast designed as well, which is a nice detail. We have our swing arms. These are simplified. The real ones, these arms were independent of each other and swung on their own. So the Suka or Tasca model ones have these modeled accurately. They're immensely fiddly designs. Oh my god, these things, when I built their Sherman 5C Firefly, it took me a while to get used to building them. But it does give us some workability if you're into that. We have our return roller with a big dirty seam line running right through the middle of it. I don't know how well you guys can see that. Another interesting thing is a lot of people will paint the return roller on a FIFA SS suspension Sherman like rubber black. Don't do that. These were actually bare steel. The HVSS, like Fury, which isn't an M4A3 by the way, it's an M4A2 FIFA SS or HVSS suspension Sherman. I know all the model companies have lied to us. On that type of Sherman suspension, it's a rubber coated wheel, but not on the FIFA SS or FIFA SS. Such a tongue twister, that one. So moving on, we have some of our dampeners for the suspension. We have the mounting brackets for the bogies. Pretty nice detail here. You will notice that these wheels are hollow. However, it does give us extra wheels that are from a later Sherman, and these don't have the hollow wheels. So I won't be using these because, well, one, it's inaccurate, and it's not even 1970s Tamiya were as bad as this. However, again, throw that into your spare bits box. You can use that for stowage. Moving on to Sprue, which is from an M4A1, so this is from the correct variant at least. So we have our final drive or transmission cover. We do have a cast texture here, very nice, and the foundry mark and cast numbering, very nice. It's one of the most important details on a Sherman, I find, and it's very weird and very striking when it's absent. We have our double door style engine access panel on the rear deck of the vehicle. We have the blank style engine access hatch, as well as the engine deck itself. Then we have our brush guards for our headlights. I think these are the rear convoy lights, and these are very, very thick, as you can see. So they are overscaled. However, if you don't like fighting with photo etch, you could use them out of the box, but be aware these are very much overscaled. So keep that in mind. So if you take it to a show and someone says something, at least you're aware of it, you know, that way. We have our armored cover for the air filter, or for like the vent on the top of the engine deck, which is a lovely cast texture. I don't know how well you guys can see that. See, does it catch the light? It's very well done. It's very well, a lot of pitting in it, which is bang on the money. We have our air cleaner assemblies. These are pretty simple. They actually are quite crisp. And we have this monster sprue. It's absolutely huge, as you can see. And you'll see that the difference in the molding quality is massively different. So we have a sprue which is from an M4A1 A3. So we have the A3 style engine hatch, I think, and then we have the M4A2 style engine hatch that is not meant to have the rear axis panel, and that's how you can tell the two marks easily apart. So if you're trying to make a movie accurate Fury, you will need the M4A2 because it's an M4A2 HVSS 76 wet rather than the A3 HVSS 76 wet that all the model companies will have you believe. And how do I know that, you'll ask? Well, I spent about 2.5-3 hours trawling through the internet trying to find pictures of the Bovington Easy 8 that they use in the movie, and I was trying to find a photo of the rear panel, and it is in fact the M4A2 style rear panel. It doesn't have the engine hatch or the engine access panel whatsoever. So if you have one of these lying around and you want to make your Fury a movie accurate one, use that, and also use the upper deck panel from an M4A2 if you have it. So we have our return rollers back to the kit. We have our cleaning rods for the weapon, or for the barrel. Bit of damage on the rear shelf on the engine deck. One of the hinges snapped. I've got quite a few of these spares, including a few resin ones that I'll use. It's a bit unfortunate that I got damaged, but sometimes it does happen. We have the end caps for our transmission cover. We have some periscope swivel mounts. Some of the moulding is very rough on this, so you can tell this must be an older sprue. We have our brush guards for the periscopes. These don't look too bad actually. They do look very fragile, so if you can get them off the sprue without damaging them, they should be fine. Then we have our headlight brush guards here. These are very, very rough. We do have a 30 cal bow machine gun. We get two of them. I don't know how well you guys can see it here. And we get two 30 cal machine guns in this box, and one of them is hollow and one of them is not. So this one actually is hollow. You can't really see it too well, guys, I'm sorry. But so I'll be using that one. It's more accurate. The tools are very, very rough in some regards. Like, they should be okay, but they do look a bit soft in places. But we do get a whole slew of tools from the various sprues here, so you have plenty of options. So just use the ones that look the sharpest to you. We have our travel lock. Again, that looks nice, pretty crisp. We have our M4A2 style engine deck. So again, like I was saying, if you want to build Fury, that's the type of engine deck you need. So on to J-Sprue. And J-Sprue is from an M51 Sherman, which is the Israeli Shermans with those big, sexy 105mm guns, I think. I can't quite remember. I'm not too familiar with the Israeli Shermans. That's the one with the big, mean muzzle brake. So we get, I'm sure we'll probably use like a single part from this sprue. The tools here are a little bit lackluster. We have another big transmission cover. It's one of the late types. And you can always tell a late transmission cover because it's got this little lip on the top, and that's designed to protect the bolt heads from enemy fire. It's something they added in during Sherman's development. We have our couple of axis or crew patches here for the driver and co-driver or machine gunner. We have the cap for either the ventilator or for the radio. I think that's for the ventilator. Yeah, so I'm not entirely sure what we're going to be using from this. I'd imagine it's literally a single part, but again, spare bits, blah 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 blah. Then we're moving on to J and C sprue, which is from an M4A4. So you can see the entire family of the Shermans in this box. We have some of the bolt assemblies for the 3-part early style transmission covers, as well as, again, parts for the 3-part transmission, some nice cast texture. Now we won't be using any of this for our Sherman because ours has the one-piece transmission cover. This looks like one of the armoured cheeks for the side of the fake, like the applique armour. We won't be using that either because that's more synonymous with the early Shermans that didn't have the wet ammunition storage solution. We have some more brush guards that look like they're made out of depleted uranium, they're so thick. We have a hollow, or should I say a solid 30 cal M1919 machine gun that is seriously undersized, and we won't be using that as we'll be using the hollow one. We have an exhaust deflector for the back of the engine deck. Again, that's solid, which is a bit disappointing, but again, I imagine these sprues are quite old. Now we're moving on to Sprue, which is basically just the Fifi SS buggy assemblies. So this looks more up to date. Again, it's almost exactly the same, we just have more options. So you have different teeth options here. But the nice thing is, even though these are again hollow wheels, I'm not going to go through this entire sprue, it's almost identical as the other, it's just a more modern one. We do have the caps to go into the back of them to make it a solid wheel. So I'd imagine this is the sprue that we're going to be doing all our work for our buggies with, and if not, this is what I'm going to be using, because the other ones I'm not using hollow wheels on one of my Shermans, it's just not in this day and age. Now move on to H-Sprue. And H-Sprue has our T23 Turret. Again, lovely cast texture on this, it's very nice. So we cannot model our pistol port open or closed. It depends on what part of Sherman's life. These were welded shut and even deleted. I think it was in April 1943, and then the crews freaked out about that because apparently they wanted their pistol ports, and they were reinstalled, I think it was like 3 or 4 months later. Again, I can't remember when they were brought back into service, but it was a very quick period between them being phased out and brought back in. So we have our split style turret coup pullout, which is actually for the gunner and loader in this case, or for the loader should I say. We have some track pads for our spare trackpad rack on the back of the vehicle. They're okay, they're a bit rough, but they'll do. We have the exhaust deflectors, 2 of them here. I'm not entirely sure which ones we're going to be using, if at all. I'm going to probably rob this one and put it back into my Marine M4A1, the one I built a couple of months ago, as I didn't know about that detail at the time. And I'm going to actually add that in, because that's actually in the real photographs, that style of deflector, as well as some deadly like racks that I'm going to build up for them as well. But more on that in another video. So again, details very nice. We have a big cast texture, or sorry, a big cast numbering and foundry numbering system here. So this, at first glance, you might think that is like the old copyright you see in 1970 kits, but actually this is accurate. This is actually how the cast numbering was done on the T23 Turret. It's very nicely done. There's no texture on it, it's just like totally smooth plastic, so it does look a bit weird, but you could put some extra tin into that, a tiny amount of it, and then stipple it. Not enough that you'll melt away the detail, or you could just put some paint over it and be okay, but it does kind of look a bit striking because it's so smooth compared to the texture of the turret. Moving on to B sprue, which is an M4A2A3 sprue, at least according to the little tab up here. So as I mentioned, you actually get 3 76 gun barrels. You get one, and they're all one piece and they're all hollow. So we get the 76 without the muzzle brake. We get the 76 with the threading for the muzzle brake. So that's actually what this is. A lot of people think this is a counterweight. Actually what this is, when they start installing the 76mm muzzle brakes on the guns, not all of them had it. So in order to protect the threading, they had a cover, basically a cylinder that you could screw over like a cap over the threading to protect it from enemy fire. So that's actually what that is. And then obviously we have the 76mm with the muzzle brake. So again, it's very handy. I'm going to probably replace my Asuka EZ8 76 with this one because it's a one piece and like I believe it's the same gun. We have our mantlet. We do have some nice cast detail on it and some cast numbering. It's a little bit flashy, a little bit seamy in places, but again, quick clean up and you'll be fine. We have the smaller style loader hatch that was found in some of the 76 turrets, which is more of the infield modified version. We have the HB 50 cal machine gun that looks totally wrong for some reason. The The proportions look way off, so I'm going to use a spare from my Asuka models. This looks like the Jenny from like the auxiliary generator exhaust from like the little Joe engine or auxiliary engine. It looks to be it. I'm not entirely sure what the hell that's meant to be. I doubt we're going to be using that either. We have a 30 cal machine gun for the turret roof if you wanted to add it for whatever reason. We have our direct vision cupola. Detail is okay. It's kind of spongy in places, if I'm honest. But again, should build up just fine. Then we have our lower turret ring that we're going to have to hide that big dirty seam. But again, just stipple on some liquid putty and you'll hide that almost immediately. And it'll also add a bit more accuracy to the model as well. So that is our gun and turret sprue. Then we have another feast sprue, again with all of our bogey assemblies. Not going to go through that again. And then yet again we have another buggy and wheel sprue, again taken from one of the other Sherman kits. And yeah, with the hollow wheel. So this, I'm not entirely sure what we're going to be using, if anything, from this. So there's a lot of waste in this kit, if I'm honest. Then we also have a very small clear sprue. And this is from their M4A1 and it's just a various periscopes and gun sights as well as the headlights. Seems to be quite a few sink marks in these, and but I'm sure they'll be just fine once you paint them up. I'm not really big on having clear periscopes anyway. I tend to paint them like a NATO black either way. But if you want that, you can have them clear if you like that type of detail. So moving on to the tracks, we get two sets of T48 track. These are all DS, and they're literally just thrown into the box. They did come in their own little bag, but they have no cardboard shielding whatsoever. So they are kind of bowed, you can kind of see that. Now, a lot of people do not like DS tracks, and in certain situations, I do agree with them. However, with the M4 Sherman family, there's very little sag on the Sherman tank. It's so slight that's hardly even noticeable in certain situations. Okay, if you see photographs of one sitting in a display in a field for the last 30 years or has been knocked out, then you will see a bit of sag when the tension slips from either age or the shock of an impact. But for the most part, they have very little sag, so DS tracks can work just fine here. There is a lot of little tails on this, and DS is notorious to clean up. So it's going to be pretty annoying to clean these up. So there we have the T48 without the duckbills. And then we have, which I think is kind of cool, we have the DS version of the T48 with the duckbills. And these were basically just track extenders designed to give the tank more traction and also help distribute the weight. I believe there was an upgrade set that you could space out the wheel and suspension systems and put the duckbills on both sides of the track, and actually really makes the Sherman look immensely mean when you see them. If I remember correctly, I think it was only the Grizzlies that had that. I can't quite remember which one, but it does exist. So just don't quote me because I didn't really look into it. It was a couple of months ago, so I've forgotten. It does happen. Anyway, I'm gonna edit that part out because no one needs to know. So we have the duck builds. These are nice. I'm going to probably use these on another build because I want to build mine as a Normandy Sherman. And I'm going to use this probably on one of my M4s, as I quite like the duck builds. Now, it is a bit unfortunate that these are all molded integrally, because often, if you look at the real duck builds, they're often missing a few teeth, as these kind of be shorn off and be bent off. But still, it's still nice that you have them. So we get the world's smallest photo etch fret in this kit. As you can see, it's absolutely tiny, almost kind of cute. But you just have some grills for the air fence for the engine and some of the mounting brackets for the tow cable, and that's about it. Not much to say there. Then we have our metal tow cable, which is stainless steel. These can be a bit tricky to form. This one's actually so thin that it actually seems to pretty conform quite well. And again, you can also just run a lighter over it. Just don't hang on to it when you put that or you'll burn your fingers. Just put them into your tweezers and then run a lighter or a match over it to anneal it, and then it should behave a little better. And then we have our cartograph decals come in their own little Ziploc bag to keep the damp away from it. And it's pretty simple. We have a few little hull drawings, a few US stars, the Polish Wing Hussar logo for the Polish armour divisions, and also a Commonwealth or British tactical marking, the 52, and then some various tank names. Not much to say there. They're cartographs, so they should behave just fine. So there you have my inbox review of Dragon's M4A1 76 Wet Operation Cobra, reference number 6083. In all, I'm pretty looking forward to building this. It's one of my favourite Sherman variants of all of them. It's the M4A1 76. I love the look of the long barrel and then the lovely hull. So we'll be building this in the very near future, and we'll be building it up as one of the vehicles that took part in the Operation Cobra or the Normandy breakouts. So I really hope you found this interesting and a little bit informative, and as you can tell, I love talking about Shermans. So thank you for watching, stay safe, I'll catch you in the next video, happy modelling, and watch out for those buses. Bye bye.